just pointing out that obviously at this time of year, many GPs see kids coming in with coughs and colds, which are normally viruses, and therefore they don't give antibiotics. Could that be why so many parents have actually said their children have got so ill with this Strep A infection?
I think that's unlikely. 80 or 90% of the time, upper respiratory infections are caused by viruses, which is what you were just saying. And antibiotics are no use against a viral infection. And GPs for many years have been trying to limit the use of antibiotics where they're not required in order to minimise side effects for the patient, because no drug is without side effects, but also to try to minimise the rates of antibiotic resistance. What we think is underpinning the current uptick in rates of both streptococcal infection per se, but also this more extreme manifestation, this invasive infection that can cause sepsis. And in fact, numbers are up about fivefold on where we were before the pandemic. We think it's probably not a reflection in a change in the bacterium. It's the same old strep that's always been infecting us, as far as we can tell. We think the thing that's changed is us. We think that probably measures that have been put in place over the last about 3 years to control the pandemic have in some way sensitized us as a population and made it more likely that we're going to see more cases all at once. And if you've got more cases in a community, there are more people to give it to the more susceptible people, and the more susceptible people are then more likely to present in the way that they have. We think that's probably what underpins this.
OK, but the problem is that the children are not as good as fighting this thing off once it gets hold.
Well, we don't know at the moment. One speculation is this could be a bit of a 1-2 punch phenomenon. Perhaps in the same way that just because of COVID restrictions, we're seeing enormous numbers of people with very, very large numbers of upper respiratory infections caused by viruses. Yeah. It could well be that perhaps infection with one of those sensitizes you or makes you more susceptible to infection or colonization with strep turning into an infection with strep. So, for instance, if you catch a dose of the flu beforehand, it's a bit like using a battering ram to knock down the doors of your castle. Once you've knocked the doors down, other people can then scurry in the breach in your defences. So it may well be that a prior infection with a virus sensitizes people or renders them more susceptible, and the strep that's always there and already there can then get a toehold. And it could be that that's what's going on.
So from what you're saying, this leaves it very difficult for not just the parents, but the doctors to decide which course of action to take. What should the warning signs be between a strep infection and what might be just a viral cold?
Well, viral colds normally cause a runny nose. So one giveaway, if you've got a high temperature and a sore throat, but a runny nose as well. Now, you could have a viral infection on top, but 80 or 90% of the time, it's going to be a virus. Yeah. The majority of the time, this will pass off trivially, and simple remedies like paracetamol are going to make this go away, and a person will follow the normal trajectory that we're all used to seeing with a cold, and you get better. Yeah. But with a bacterial infection like strep, you might see other manifestations beginning to come in. A rash. Now, some viruses do cause a rash, which means it is harder to tell apart, but it's a bumpy rash. So if your skin feels a bit sandpapery when you run your hand over it, it could be this. If you've got a bright red flushed appearance on your cheeks, that could be that you've got scarlet fever. This is one sign that the infection is becoming more significant, and it could then become an invasive infection. If a person doesn't get better with the normal trajectory of a cold, they've got those rash signs, they're also showing other signs of deterioration, then you should definitely seek a second opinion from your GP. And the good news is that if caught early, these strep infections respond reliably and reassuringly to cheap and cheerful, very safe antibiotics like amoxicillin.
OK, and if you don't, how quickly can this thing turn against you, if you like, in your own body, and as you say, lead to sepsis and the body poisoning itself?
Very quickly. And this isn't just children. This can happen to adults as well. And a close colleague of mine ended up in this situation and ended up in intensive care a few years ago with an invasive infection that started off as something trivial and got into the wrong place, into the bloodstream, and then turned into this phenomenon we call sepsis. So the answer is, if you see an individual and they've had this protracted illness, they've had some of these other signs and symptoms we've been discussing, they aren't getting better, and then they show signs of getting a lot worse, a higher fever, cold, clammy, shut down, then you should definitely take that seriously and get a second opinion.
Dr. Chris Smith, consultant at Cambridge University, very useful advice. Thank you very much indeed for speaking to us.
You're welcome.
And GB News, thank you. Stay healthy, stay safe indeed, and obviously get in touch with a medical practitioner and get expert advice as soon as you believe things are going all right.